Right, folks, I think we're good to go. All right, let's get started. Well, welcome everyone to the Paketo Working Group weekly meeting. We're really glad to have you here. Let me share my screen real quick here. All right, who would like to take notes for this session? Is there anyone who would like to volunteer for that? Otherwise, I could try. Oh yeah. Try. And yeah, thank you, Lee. Feel free to add yourself to the attendees list, so we can. Oh my, sorry. There you go. Okay, and also your affiliation you want to share. Okay, so new faces. I see a couple of new faces. I don't know if this is the first time you join this session. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi there. I may be a face that you don't recognize. I I don't recognize you. I'm a returning face. I have been in this meeting certainly last year at some point. I am stepping in as a manager of VMware's Paketo contribution team. And having previously worked more focused on the commercial implementations of those build packs. Prior to that, I'm an emeritus contributor to the Cloud Native Build Pack project itself.
Oh, awesome. Welcome, Simon. Yeah, probably I'm the new face for you. So I've been serving Paketo as a community manager for some weeks, like 3 to 4 weeks. So yeah, we're really glad to have you here.
Thank
you. And now Mr. Ozzy Osbourne. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi all.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, I've been working on build packs for a bit, but mostly implementation side and some of the sort of stuff to do with how Red Hat wants to use build packs in the future, and particularly interested in the whole Docker file stuff that they've got going on over there at the moment. But a lot of what I'm doing is now starting to stray back down into the, now that sort of stuff is settling, how are we actually going to use this? And so it's time to start engaging with you guys as well.
That's great. Welcome. Welcome us. We were glad to have you here. All right. Anyone else? No, I don't think so. Okay. So next up will be to review outstanding RFCs. So we'll start from the bottom. RFC for secure runtime environments. I saw there were some updates from Sam, the author, that got approved by Emily. Is there any comment around this RFC?
Looks like he's incorporated most of our feedback. So I guess at this point, we're mostly waiting on Dan, unless your comment is recent. I don't know if you need to re-review or if you have another outstanding comment, Dan.
I probably need to re-review this one. Sorry.
Thank you. For folks who are just joining, you can go there and just join the conversation, provide your opinions if you want. There's the summary of the proposal and all the comments right there in the PR. Okay. Next up will be the image retention policy RFC. Is there any comment or update around this RFC?
So I updated this with the last requested changes, and we've got a couple approvals. I don't know what's left to do here if we're getting close to merging.
I think we're ready to merge, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Right here. So image retention policy. All right. Next up will be stack descriptor RC. Let me see, is there any recent update? Yeah, pretty recent.
I finally got a chance to read through this one, and I think most of my questions were about the cases where we're sort of setting values in this file, but based on sort of the state of the image that we're building from using the Docker file, there might be a right answer to this. And the question is sort of, do we want to, like cross-reference what's in this file versus the answer we find in the base image, or do we want to sort of like take that information out and just grab it from the base image? So for example, like if we were rebuilding, our Bionic stacks using this stack descriptor, and we went and looked in the /COS release file, we'd find that, the distribution ID is Ubuntu and the distribution name is version ID is 1804. And I think maybe we can make things easier on people just by like using those values directly rather than having people specify it. And especially when the new scheme for stacks rolls out in CMB is going to sort of require that all that stuff is consistent.
Fine with that. I can remove that and then just like basically describe that as like how the tool would backfill those pieces of metadata.
Yeah, I think maybe that'd be easier. And then the other thing that's like that is the platforms, where, I think you're either directly referencing a manifest for a single image, in which case you're going to inherit the platform, or like sort of your base image, right, that your Docker file is building on top of, or if that is referencing like a manifest list that has a multi-arch image, do we want to do something there where we, just use whatever platforms we find?
My only concern about that is like, there are a lot of platforms. So like, I just looked at Jammy, there's 6 platforms in the Jammy base image. I'm not sure we want to support like RISC v64 or I don't know. There was like a few others that I was like, these are kind of on the long tail of things that I'm not sure we immediately are looking to support. So I certainly could see there being like some code in there that basically is like, this platforms list operates as a mask to say like, you have to, when I pull the index, I'm gonna grab the platforms that match these things. There has to at least be an underlying base image that matches the platform specified in this file. But like, I wouldn't go as far as just saying like, yeah, we should support every platform that the base image supports. Because that could, that's a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we should support all of them, but I think maybe we need to, or at least reading this wasn't obvious to me, sort of in the multi-arch case, sort of how we would go about this. Made me feel like maybe we need to have some more requirements about the Docker file. It's like, we have from a base image. It seems like we would want to require that to be a build arg so that we could run it multiple times with different inputs and then stitch together a multi-arch image from the output. if we're going to support multiple platforms in a single invocation of create stack. And then if we don't want to do that, for all versions of the base image, we want to find a way to filter down.
Do you need to? So like my understanding is that if I use something like BuildKit and say this is building for like ARM64, that when I say like from Ubuntu Jammy, BuildKit's going out and grabbing the like ARM64 base image because I'm telling it like that's the platform I'm targeting. I shouldn't have to specify something more specific.
But then you can be specific. I guess the question is, if we want this to spit out a multi-arch image on the other side, then I think we can't let the default behavior take over. It's like if I'm running on an AMD 64, VM in my Mac desktop, like by default, if I run the Docker file that's building from, and I just say like Ubuntu Bionic, it's going to pull the Linux AMD 64, and it's going to build a Linux AMD 64 image. Now, if I want to do the ARM one, I need to more explicitly tell it to use the ARM one because it's not going to match the platform by default, but it actually can run it if it's using, the QEMU virtualization. And then you need to do something to take the two outputs of that and turn them into a multi-arch image. So it's like, if this create stack command is going to be doing that magic for us, then I think I need more detail about how that would work in a case like this. And maybe we need to put more requirements on the Docker file so we can explicitly force it to use certain variants of the base image in order to get variants that we need for our multi-arch build.
I can look into that. It was my understanding. So like the code I have that's like kind of proving out this bit right now, basically I just end up setting up like BuildKit from Go, and then I just call into the Docker client's like image build infrastructure to which you can pass in the targeted platform. And so I'm just saying like Linux ARM64 there directly. And then in my Docker file, I'm just saying from Ubuntu Jammy. And what that ends up doing, I believe, I can go and check the built images just to look to make sure that the underlying base image that it's referencing is actually the ARM64 platform version. But my belief is that that is what it's actually pulling, because I'm explicitly telling the platform or telling Docker what the platform is at that point. I didn't realize
this
that
could
I have
just
to
be
actually
my
change
naive
the Docker
assumptions from like mostly using the Docker file build rather than the Go BuildKit interface. So maybe this is all like a lot easier than I was imagining. But in any case, I sort of want a little bit more detail here about like, can we expect a multi-arch image on the other side and how that might work.
I can provide a bunch of background on that. Yeah, that is my intention, is to have it spit out on the other side. Like an OCI archive that is like a multi-arch like image index that has, all the variants of OS platforms that you're targeting.
Yeah. I'll retract my suggestion there and just turn it into a confusion. My suggestion is mostly based on my just using the Docker file, but maybe it's easier with the Go interface to BuildKit.
I can definitely just provide some more explanation of what's going to be happening when you specify more than one platform.
Cool.
Right. Any other comment around this RFC? No. Okay. So next up will be the Jammy Stacks RFC. Yeah, also from Ryan.
So I've made some updates here based on prior feedback. There's a new tiny stack ID, which is just going to be, I add tiny onto the end of the existing Jammy stack ID. So you'll end up with like IO, Buildpacks, stacks, Jammy, tiny. That's the tiny identifier. I think that I also kind of added some more detail about what this could mean for Bionic if we are going to try to like align the stacks in terms of the way that they operate. I think there's still an open question about the actual repository names and tagging. I think we maybe just have like a difference of opinion on that front still. So I don't know, we still need to hash it out in order before we get to something we could use. I mostly, if I can just like air my grievances here, I mostly am just confused by the current naming, like repository naming scheme, because like we have these images that we're like calling Paketo Buildpacks/build and Paketo Buildpacks/run, except like depending upon which stack happened to be released most recently, what that image is like entirely different in terms of its content. Really the way you would figure out what's in an image is to look at its tag. To me, like tags, at least the way that I've interacted with them in like every other kind of thing, they're really trying to like specify for the most part what like version a thing is. Even stuff like Jammy is a version number. It happens to be a name, but it's like a version of Ubuntu. It isn't that like Ubuntu is entirely different or like configured entirely differently in those different versions. So to me, to have like these other things like the base, full, tiny information in there just seems a little bit odd. Because you are like at that point delivering like logically different artifacts.
Building off your Jammy. First of all, I understand this is totally a bike shed. I'm fine with whatever we come out of this with, but I think we should do the bike shed just for fun. Going off your Ubuntu, Jammy is a version analogy. Does that mean our repos should really be like build tiny, build base, build full? And then it's like Jammy and Bionic are tags on that. It's like those are actually our concepts and then there's versions of them.
I mean, that belies, like you're thinking from the perspective of like Ubuntu is the only OS we'll ever ship in a stack, which I'm not sure is entirely true.
I guess it's more like, is Ubuntu the only OS we would ship and call base? I'm curious about how these sort of like flavor words that don't really correspond to the stack ID, like how we're going to use them in a world where we're supporting multiple distributions of Linux. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, the name of the repository has never corresponded with the stack ID. Like we don't have any repos called like blah, 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 Bionic anywhere. And the current stack ID is Bionic.
Yeah. Setting aside what we do now.
Sure.
I
guess the question is like, do you want that there to be alignment there? Like that, is that a goal?
What I'm interested in is, number one, if possible, having a Docker Hub landing page where someone can sort of read about the different tags and what their purpose is. And I realize that's like maybe a bad reason to do a name, just to like throw them all in the same repo so that when you get there, you can read about them. But I think the way Docker Hub navigation stuff works right now, when things are in different pages, it's harder for people to discover what options there are versus when they're all on the same page. But, maybe we could do something better where we have the same README everywhere and we link across. So that's like one concern, but it's not a super important one. Concern number two, and I think in some ways this is already addressed here. My big pet peeve about the current system is the -CMB part of the tags. I always forget about it. Because in some ways it seems like it's putting a qualifier on something when I feel like it's the default, like whatever that pre-image is that isn't the stack image, like I don't care about that. I don't care if anyone pushes it to a tag ever again. It can just be an implementation detail ephemeral that gets thrown away. But it seems like that's already in here. So those are my two big things. I'd like the CMB to go away. And I'd like, if I'm navigating to the stack image on Docker Hub, I'd love to be able to see a navigational guide, even if things are split across multiple repos that help me get there. And then everything else is just byte shedding. But I think conceptually, my question is there like a base build image and then different flavors of it, like the UBI flavor and the Jammy flavor and the Bionic flavor, where it would make sense to put those together? Or is it like Jammy is a stack and then there's tags that are for base and full and tiny, which is similar to what we have now. But like you said, Ryan, it's like whatever latest is there gets confusing. There's no good version of latest. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I've convinced myself through this whole saying this out loud that there's no better option than what's in it right now. But it's like, do we want to call it like Ubuntu build that then has Jammy and Bionic, but then you still have the flavors, and then what's the latest? I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I mostly was like going for something that was as closely as possible, just like mapping the logical artifact, which is like an OS with a certain configuration. And then the tag ends up being like a version identifier, so that you can actually like pin to a particular thing or stay on latest or whatever you want. That's, I guess, slightly different than if you went with one that was like, you know, Jammy build base. Then like the tags are actually like differing depending upon what you are, what happens to have been released most recently. You wouldn't be able to do anything like, say, like, you know, Jammy build latest, because depending upon which image happens to have been published most recently, you'd probably get something entirely different than what you'd expect.
Although we could pick some variant to be the default, right? And then you could have like tiny latest and full latest. I think.
Sure, you end up recreating this with other tags, basically is what ends up happening.
Sort of the analogy that I was thinking about is maybe like how Golang images are handled in Docker Hub, where yes, there's Golang and there's different versions, and then there's, you know, mutable tags for different version lines. It's, you know, major version X, but there's also, I believe with Golang, there's different underlying operating systems. It's like, do I want the Alpine version of this? Do I want the BusyBox version of this? So I think having sort of separate lineages all in a repo together can be convenient as a user, and it's not too confusing. In my mind, the question is, what is the logical thing that people are looking for? And then they want to find all the variants of that thing in one place. So it's like, are these different stacks different things that people are looking for, or are they variants of the same thing? That's sort of the abstract question I'm trying to ask.
I'm not sure I know.
Yeah, that's why I'm sort of proposing the build and run schema. Like those seem like, it's like, do I want the build image or the run image? It's like, oh, here are all the flavors that are available to me. And then we can use latest as some sort of defaulting mechanism. And maybe we can even use it to eventually like move people to a new default stack. I don't know. That was my original proposal, but I'm curious what other people think, and I'm not deeply wedded to that. Just we have this opportunity to rethink the tags and wanted to make sure we fully explore the option set.
I think for me as a stacks maintainer, the tags, the way that they are now in the Bionic stacks are so confusing. I would love to simplify the tags as much as possible. So I actually do like what's outlined in the RFC now, because it just, you know, makes it a lot simpler. And I'm also kind of wondering on your point about like discoverability in Docker Hub, like how important would that be? Because I was thinking most people would be picking up, obviously people would be looking at Docker Hub, but a lot of people would be picking up the stacks from what we have in our builders. So I wasn't sure how important making sure everything would be like shown up on one page in Docker Hub would be, because people would mostly be using the builders anyway.
I think the same problem is gonna happen on the builder side. Like this RFC doesn't outline that, but like I definitely had an open question at the bottom of like, what does this mean for builders, generally speaking? I think we're gonna have the same kind of like naming concern there as well. It'd be great if they lined up, right? That would help.
Yeah. Are there any builders maintainers here? Because I saw I tagged them and I think Frankie might have responded, but I actually do wonder what this will look like for our builders. And it would be great to have some kind of idea before this. I mean, we don't have to fully have it decided to merge this in because it's kind of a separate concern, but it would be nice to know like how people will consume these through the builders.
It would make sense if what we did here was consistent with the builders. Which pushes me slightly, I guess, in favor more strongly to the position I made in the comment, where it would be nice if builder was just a repo and I could go there and learn about the builders.
But if your concern is like discoverability, then like we don't have to name them in order to achieve that. You could just do like what's proposed in the actual RFC now and make it so that the READMEs basically cross-post information about the other builders that are available or other stacks that are available. And then for your concern about like what the default could be, you could duplicate publish one of the stacks under the like canonical build or run or builder repository. Like all of that is achievable still. If your concern is discoverability versus like what the name is. I think for me, the hardest thing in the current tag naming thing is like, I'll go to the like current page and I'm kind of like, what tags even are there? And I like end up scrolling back like 5 pages before I discover like, oh, there's like a such and such Buildpacks base builder thing that I can use. And like, it just isn't easily identifiable on the front page.
Yeah, I think you're right that we can solve that problem sort of regardless of how we name them, right? So it's not a huge, it's not a breaking, it's not like a blocker, you know, it's just like, would it be easier if they're all in the same repo? Like, what do we gain from separating them versus what do we gain from putting them together? I think we gain slightly more from putting them together, but I think there's so much you could do to mitigate it either way that it just comes down to a matter of taste and what's more similar to what other people are doing.
Okay, is there any other comment around this proposal? No. Just a reminder that you can keep the conversation going right there in the PR. You can add your comments there. Okay, great. That's it for RFC so far. Next up will be if there's any update on the libcmd v2 project, or is there any question this project? Yeah, I guess no. Okay. All right. Okay. Any recent project update? I mean, there are some updates that I had in line, but not exactly recent. Yeah, like the Liberty Buildpack and some other stuff, but it happened like weeks ago. So is there any recent project update that you'd like to share? All right. Yeah, Tim? Okay. Okay, is there any questions, especially from folks who just joined? Is there any question around the project? Anything you would like to discuss? No. All right. Well, if there's anything else, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for your time, for your input, and hope to see you next week. Thanks.